We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Hey Amid Beis in Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 35b. The Mishnah says, let's say you have a situation again of a mudar hana, somebody's not allowed to get benefit from somebody else. V'torim es trumaso umasrosav l'daito. Still, that person is allowed to take off his truma on his behalf or his meiser on his behalf if it is with his knowledge. And the Mefarish over here says, V'torim es trumaso Mefarish beGemara. This line of the Mishnah will be explained in the Gemara. And the Mishnah continues, Umakriv olav kine zavin, kine zavos, kine yoldos, chatos, v'ashamos. Let's say the person is a Kohen, and he's not allowed to benefit from the Kohen, but still the Kohen can bring the nests of the carbon that's talking about the bird karbanos of the zav and the zava, and the oledes, that's the woman who gives birth, the chatos and the asham, all of those are going to be permitted. It's not considered to be getting benefit from the Kohen, just because the Kohen is bringing these karbanos on the other person's behalf. The Mefarish over here says, Umakriv olavim haya Kohen osa shenadar shelo yanem imenu. If the person he's not supposed to get benefit from is a Kohen, yachol lahakriv olav kinei zavin v'kinei zavos v'chulu. He could still bring these bird karbanos of the zavin and the zavos, etc. And the Mishnah continues, Umalamdo medrash halachas v'agadas. He's also allowed to teach a medrash and halacha and agada. That's not considered a benefit that is prohibited. Avol lo yilamdenu mikra, but he cannot teach him psukim. Avol melamed who has banav as benos of mikra, but he could teach his sons and his daughters. He can teach them psukim. And the Gemara says, they had the following question. Hani kahani, when it comes to the Kohanim in general, Shaluchei didon havu, are they considered our shluchim when they do the avod in the Beis HaMikdash? O Shaluchei d'Shemaya, or are they considered the shluchim, the messengers of heaven? And the Gemara says, Lamai nafkamina, what difference does it make? Lamudar hana, it makes a difference for our case of a mudar hana. Let's say you're not going to get benefit from the Kohen. If you're going to say that they are our shluchim, so hamahani leiv also. So then the Kohen is giving him a benefit. He's like your shliach, and it would be prohibited for the Kohen to do the avodah on your behalf if it's a case of mudar hana. V'yamet shluchi d'shmaya shari. But if you say that they're shluchim of heaven, so then it would be permitted. And the Gemara says, "Mai." So what is the halacha? Do we consider them shluchi didon or shluchi d'shmaya? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here the following proof, the Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, Makriv olav kinei zavin, it says in our Mishnah that he's allowed to bring these various karbanos. So, Iyamrit shluchi didon kamahanile, if you say that they're our shluchim, isn't that a benefit? Why is he allowed to bring these various karbanos? But the Gemara notes, Vilataymich, but 1 second, according to you, Lisni Makriv olav karbanos, why doesn't the Mishnah simply say that the Kohen can bring karbanos on behalf of this individual? Why does it specify these particular karbanos? Ela mechusre kapara shani. Rather, the Mishnah is actually only specifying a kind of carbon for a mechusar kapara, for somebody that lacks atonement, meaning these karbanos are being brought for atonement purposes, and maybe those karbanos are actually different. Maybe by those karbanos, even if you say that they are shluchei didon, still it is not going to be a problem. Why would it not be a problem? Because Rabbi Yochanan says, Hakol tzrichen das, all karbonos, they require das. As the Mefarish over here says, Rabbi Yochanan, Hakol tzrichen das, kol karbonos, tzrichen sheyihu makrivim bailim, the owners always have to bring the carbon. It always has to be with the das of the owner, chutz mi mechusrei, except for when it comes for karbonos, which are brought by mechusrei kapara, by people who are lacking atonement. They're bringing it for kapara purposes. There you do not require das. So, again, chutz mi mechusrei kapara, except for the karbonos of mechusrei kapara, shaharei adam mevi carbon al bonav ve'al bonosav hakatanim, because the person is even allowed to bring the carbon for his sons and his daughters who are minors. Even that is okay. Shenemar, like the pasuk itself says, Zos Toras Hazav Bein Gadol Bein Katan. It says this is the law of the Zav. It doesn't matter an adult. It doesn't matter if it's a minor. It doesn't require das. Since it doesn't require the das of the owner, so therefore it's not considered a benefit either, and it is going to be permitted in the case of Mudar Hana, like our Mishnah said. And the Ran over here explains, Ella mechusar kapara shani, the cases of mechusar kapara, those lacking kapara, that is different. Kilomar va'adraba, what the Gemara is saying really is on the contrary. Tifshad li'idoch gisu, you should answer the other direction. The kevan detana mechusar kapara b'lechut, since our Mishnah says only mechusar kapara, only those karbonos are permitted. The ein srichen das, it's just those karbonos which happen to be, those karbonos don't require the das of the owner. Mashma dav kahani, it sounds like only those are permitted. Mishum de kevan de ein srichen das, because since there's there's no requirement of das, vaday kohen lav shlichus and kavit. So in those particular karbanos, the kohen is not doing our shlichus, it's not considered a hana, and it's mutter. Aval b'shar karbanos, but when it comes to other karbanos, hatzrich and das, which require the das of the owner, shluchi didanin. So then on the contrary, really the kohen is doing our shlichus, and therefore would be a problem. The lo listening makrav of karbanos v'aver because if all karbanos were okay, it should have just said karbanos. Why does it say these particular karbanos? Umiyu, but says the Ran, nevertheless, lo mifshat abayin legamri. Our question is not completely answered. You could also say that mechusrei kapara is chosen in our mission as a chiddush. The afal pisha matiro lechol bekachim, because mechusrei kapara, by those karbanos, it actually allows the individual to now eat kachim. So shari, it's permitted. So maybe even over there where it's actually permitting the person to do something he wasn't allowed to do before, so maybe that's a chiddush. Even those karbanos you could bring, v'chol shekein b'shar karbanos, and certainly other karbanos. And the Ran continues, and from Rabbi Yochanan also, Damar hakol tzrichin das. Rabbi Yochanan said that all karbanos require das. Lo mifshat tabayin lomar deshluchi didaninu. You can't answer from Rabbi Yochanan either that the kohanim are considered our shluchim. It could be they are shluchim of Shamayim. The ikol meimer derachmona shavinu lechani shluchim. It could be the Torah says that the kohanim are only shluchim of Shamayim. Kol heicha dika das bailam. Only in situations where there's das bailam. So there's no definite answer from Rabbi Yochanan either. But the point over here is it could be that the Mishnah again is only talking about karbanos of mechusrei kapara. Only in those situations it's going to be considered that it's not shluchi didan, and it's not going to be considered a benefit. Chutz mi mechusrei kapara, again, except for mechusrei kapara, like we said, that do not require das. Zav v'zavo mitzoru mitzoras v'yoledis. That refers to the karbanos of a zav, zava, mitzora, mitzoras, and yoledis. Uvekulu ksiv toras. In all of these cases, it uses the language in the pasuk of toras. V'karilu mechusrei kapara. The reason why they're called mechusrei kapara is mishum she'asurun likanis lemikdash v'lechol bekachim ad sheyaviu kaparasim, because they're not allowed to enter the Beis HaMikdash and they can't eat kachim until they bring this kapara. That's why they're called mechusrei kapara. Vahani, and now the Ran explains, in these cases, kevan de'ein karbanan bol lechapara, the carbon that they're bringing doesn't really come for a kapara for a particular chet. It's really coming, it's mechusrei kapara in the sense that it allows them to enter the mikdash, it allows them to partake from kachim, but it's not for a particular chet, so therefore ein tzrichin das. Therefore these karbanos do not require das. Aval kol shetzrichin kapara, but the Ran understands that any carbon which requires, where there was a requirement, a need for kapara, al chet, for a particular sin, so then already the person is bringing a carbon for a particular sin, so tzrichin das, so those kind of karbanos do require das, and therefore again the Gemara is saying maybe we make a distinction between the different kinds of karbanos and these mechusrei kapara karbanos, which are not coming for a particular chet, no das is required, and maybe only over there they're not considered shluchei didan, it's not considered a benefit, and that's why it's permitted. But the Gemara continues, Ela meyata, but according to what Rabbi Yochanan says, that Zos Toras tells us whether the person's a gadol, whether a katan, you don't require das. So Rabbi Yochanan, Zos Toras hayoledis v'gomer. What's Rabbi Yochanan going to do with the pasuk that says Zos Toras hayoledis, talking about a woman who's just given birth? Bein ketana uvein gadol. That means whether she's a minor or whether she is an adult. Are we saying that a minor is able to give birth? Ketana bas leido, he is a minor who's a girl really able to give birth. V'atani Rabbevi kamid Rav Nachman. But Rav Bevi taught in front of Rav Nachman. Shalosh nashim meshamshos b'moch. There are 3 women that when they have relations, they can use a pad. In other words, they can make sure to prevent themselves from becoming pregnant, and they are ketana, umeuberes, umeinika, a minor, or a woman who's pregnant, or a woman who's nursing. In all of these cases, getting pregnant could be considered dangerous, therefore they can prevent that. Ketana, shemetesaber v'tomos, and it's saying, by a ketana, maybe she'll become pregnant, and she will die, meaning to say that if the ketana becomes pregnant, she'll die, it'll be dangerous, but she's not actually going to give birth to a viable child in that situation, and yet you're saying, Zos Toras hayoledis, as if the ketana is able to give birth. And so the Gemara answers very simply, Ahi Zos Toras hayoledis, bein pikachas, bein shota. Over there, the interpretation, when it says Zos Toras hayoledis, it doesn't mean whether she's an adult or a minor. It means whether she's a person who has understanding, or whether she's a shota, if she's an imbecile. Even in a case where she doesn't have das as an adult, there also, shekein adam mevi karban alishto shota. A person is able to bring the karban on behalf of his wife, who is a shota, kedivrei Rabbi Yehuda, and that follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Adam mevi korban asher al ishto, a person brings a korban of a wealthy person on behalf of his wife. There are different levels of karbanos, and the point is, we follow the amount of money that the husband has. V'chol karbanos shechayeves, and all of the karbanos that she is chayev, he brings, shekach kosev la, because that's what he writes for in the ksuba. V'achrayas de'is lachalai min kadamos dina. And any responsibilities that you have incurred before this time, I'm going to undertake those obligations. And the Ran over here explains, Hahi zos Toras hayoledes ben pikachas ben shota shekein adam mevi korban alishto kreb Yehuda. When it says zos Toras hayoledes, what it means is, even whether she's a pikachas, she has understanding, whether she's a shota and she does not have understanding, in both of those situations, the person can bring a korban on behalf of his wife, like Reb Yehuda. Kiloma, what the Gemara means to say is, Ilo eshkechon da adam mevi korban alishto. If we didn't find the case where a husband brought a korban on behalf of his wife, lo havim arbin on shota, so then we wouldn't come to include a shota. Dilaman kamazer achmana, because who's the Torah talking to? Who is the Torah warning? Bishlama bekat, and I understand if the Torah is talking about a kat and a minor, so lavua kamazer, so then the Torah is telling her father, let's say we were talking about a minor, let's say a minor could give birth to a child, so then the warning is going to the father, and we're saying that the father brings the korban on her behalf. Ela shota laman, but if we're talking about a shota, so again, who's being warned over here? Aval hashta da amar Rabbi Yehuda, but now that Rabbi Yehuda said da adam mevi korban al ishto, that a husband has to bring the korbanos on behalf of his wife, so ikolok mekrat zos toras lioledes shota, we can say zos toras lioledes is really talking about a shota who has a husband. Sheinanu tzrichin daita el das habal. We don't need her understanding. We don't need her consent. We can go by the das of the husband. Kevan shu mevi korbanos, since in general he's the one, the husband is obligated to bring her korbanos. And the Ran continues, Hachi Garsin and Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Adam may be korban asher al ishto, when a husband brings a korban for his wife, he has to bring the level of korban of a wealthy person. V'chol korbanos she chayev, all korbanos that she's chayev. Amar Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda says, Lefikach, therefore in Patra, let's say there's a case of divorce, so eino chayev b'achar yusan, at that point in time he's no longer chayev in terms of the responsibility for those korbanos. Shekach koseves lo achrayes disli aloch min kadam astana, because that's what it says in the Ksuba, when they're married, then he has this achrayas. V'hachi perushon, here's the explanation, says the Ran. Adam mevi korban asher al ishto she'af apisha kol isha sheyesh labal. Even though a wife who's married, lo have ashira, she can't be considered wealthy. Sharei kol ma shekonsi shekana bala, because everything that the wife acquires is owned by the husband. Afilu achi, nevertheless, kevan shabala asher, since the husband is an asher, since he's wealthy, mevi b'shvila korban asher b'karbanos she ba'olav yored. He has to bring, anytime you're talking about korban olav yored, karbanos where it's different depending on the amount of wealth that you have, he has to bring the korban asher. The point over here is, when his wife is chayev a korban, the husband is chayev. This is true of any obligation karbanos that she has, that would exclude any karbanos that she gives voluntarily, a neder and a dava, but any other korban of obligation, that achrayas goes upon the husband. And in terms of determining how the karbanos are brought, whether they're the korban of a wealthy person or a poor person, that's going to be determined by the status of the husband. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lafikach, therefore in Patra Kolomar Shagarsha, therefore let's say he divorced her, so Eino Chayev B'achar Yusan, he's not going to be Chayev in these obligations. Shekach Koseves Lo B'shover, Shiosa Lo B'shas Gershin, Mechsubaso Koseves Lo, Shimo Cheles Kol Achrayas, Sheyesh Lo Olam Mikodem Lachen, because at the time of the divorce, what she says is, at that time she writes in the shover, she says, Am Mochel, any of the Achrayas that you had from before this point in time, that is all going to be forgiven at that point. That forgiveness of all obligations includes karbanos as well. To Rabbi Yehuda Darish Lashon Hedyot, that's how Rabbi Yehuda understands the language. And the Ran notes over here, when it says over here that a person brings a korban for his wife like Rabbi Yehuda, lav dafka Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't have to be like Rabbi Yehuda, datani reisha stama, adam mevi korban asher alishto, because according to the Ran's girsa, it's actually just a stam tanakama that says that a husband brings a korban asher for his wife. Since we don't know who the Tanakama is, Rabbi Yehuda Iriba, and then we mention Rabbi Yehuda later over here, so Talinan La B'didei, we assume it's him, we assume it's Rabbi Yehuda's Shita. The Ran over here is referring to his girsa. In the Ran's girsa, the girsa is Adam Mevi Korban Asher Al Ishto, V'chol Karbana Shichayeves, that's just the Tanakama, it's Tam, we don't know who says that. And then Amar Rabbi Yehuda Lefikach Im Patreinu Chai B'achar Yusan, so we attribute the Tanakama to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. In our girsa, we actually don't have the Tanakama like that anyhow. Our girsa simply is the Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Adam Mevi Carbon Asher Al Ishto. It says explicitly, this is Rabbi Yehuda's Shita, that a person brings a carbon Asher on behalf of his wife. In any case, what the Gemara is saying is that when it says Zos Torahs Hayoledes, it means to say whether the woman is a Pikachas or a Shota, because it's referring to the husband, because a husband is responsible for the carbonos of his wife, and therefore, again, there is no das required in this case as well. And in a case where there is no das required, so then it's not a problem if the Kohen brings that kind of carbon on behalf of the individual. It's not considered a benefit. It's not a problem by a Muder Hana, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph.